Hi, I'm Ray Seahorn, and you are listening to Pluribus Diaries.
Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Pluribus Diaries. I'm Annie.
I'm Jen.
And we have a special guest today, a listener of Pluribus Diaries and big Pluribus fan, and a social worker who is here to talk about a very special topic, Amelia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amelia.
Hi, Amelia.
We're excited to have Amelia here just to have another set of opinions and another voice in the room, because we're talking about a pretty tough subject, which I think comes up frequently throughout Pluribus from start to finish in many, many different ways. And that is the issue of consent, agency, free will, all of these things.
Yeah.
And Amelia is a listener of the pod, but we've talked before about this topic. And we just said, you know what? These thoughts are good. We just need to bring them to the pod because I think we can have a really fun, interesting, thoughtful, insightful discussion about this. So Amelia, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found Pluribus?
Oh, how I found Pluribus? Well, it was a natural extension of watching Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Because, once you're fans of those, you have to watch Pluribus. And
yes.
I mean, as you said, I'm a listener, and before I listened to Pluribus Diaries, I listened to X-Files Diaries.
Woo-hoo!
So already, which I love. Goes without saying, and already primed to love Vince Gilligan. And then when I jumped into those other shows, I became desperate for Pluribus and was very, very happy with how it turned out.
Nice.
And I think it's one of the shows recently that has the most, it's extremely ripe for discussion of all of these complicated issues. And I'm very happy to be here to discuss some of them.
Fantastic.
Well, let's start right away with just the joining in general, in terms of how we approach, because no one in Pluribusville, which is the world, consented to this joining. It's they didn't say, hey, I want to do that. I mean, that Kusamayo is an exception because she's the only one who has actually chosen it. And we can talk about that later too. That's a different issue. Yeah. But just the fact that the entire human race, except for these 13 people, none of them consented, but they all seem to be totally cool with it. And are they? We don't know. We don't know. And then does that mean that since they didn't consent to this, does that mean that every decision they make afterwards, how can they be consenting?
I think that's such a great question because it gets at the root of a lot of things, which is if you don't consent to the situation that you find yourself in, is anything you do in that situation done with consent?
Right.
And beyond that, are they sort of mentally, emotionally able to consent because they sort of lack their own individual will at this point? And so is individuality and consent something that's tied together? I think I would argue that it probably is. And I think that it's also a really complex question, as all of this is, because I think that in our minds, for me, certainly as a viewer, when I'm picturing someone who's acting without consent, I'm picturing them resisting and being sort of actually unhappy with the situation. But they seem happy. Everything they say implies that they're happy. Everything they do implies that they're happy. And so it makes it harder, I think, as viewers to grasp. They still might be in a situation in which they don't consent. It makes it slightly more complex, which I love. Tell me your take on that, Amelia.
Well, I just think when you say the word "they seem happy," I think we have to examine what happy even means to them.
Yes,
because their happiness to me comes across more like basically sedation, because they're not able to experience seemingly any other emotions apart from that. It's a real flattened state, even though they keep saying they're happy. What does that even mean? Because when I think about happiness, I think about it in contrast to unhappiness. And if you take away the unhappiness, then what does happiness actually mean? And then if if you're happy to do something, but happiness doesn't have any meaning any longer, then what are you? What are they experiencing? What is going on for them? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. because they've lost their individuality, and like we all have things that we could say right now that make us happy, and they would all be different. Like you would have different things that make you happy than me. I like X, Y, and Z, but as soon as I have become part of the hive, X, Y, and Z I no longer have. I now do tasks A, B, and C because A, B, and C is what everyone is doing. I pick up trash. I milk cows. I go. Sorry, I love talking about milking the cows.
You always mention milking the cows as the example, which I love.
I literally think about the hive as just a bunch of them out there milking cows. Like that's what I think of them doing. For me on the outside, I go, how can you be happy doing all of these things that you previously would not have said? Maybe some people love milking cows, and no offense to all the people who love milking cows, but I'm just saying, if everybody is milking cows, suddenly that becomes the thing that everyone is happy about. And like, it's hard to make sense of that from the outside, you know?
Yeah. Like, I think if your goals and your desires and your emotional responses are being shaped or even determined by this system that you can't step outside of, it's not really clear to me that happiness is even yours. It might feel like real from the inside to them that it is, but it's been engineered in a way that like bypasses the kinds of the reflections, like you say, that what makes us happy, what makes you happy or me happy as individual. So it just kind of removed totally. And I find that really interesting because we can't deny that they're happy. They are happy. They seem happy, right? It's not really useful to kind of deny what they say they feel. But I think it's just misleading. It's a different term to what we think of as happiness, really.
Yeah. I think that's a really great distinction as well, because I think that it's true that happy may not be the right adjective for describing the hive. I always kind of think of them as blissed out. They seem more. I think you use the right word, Amelia. Sedated.
And like I think how Carol said, you know, back in, I can't remember which episode, maybe you guys remember, but you wouldn't ask a drug dealer to describe their product because
exactly.
It's this really synthetic form of an emotion that isn't the real happiness. When somebody's high on heroin, I wouldn't know. I haven't experienced myself.
I think I can speak for Jen that we haven't either, but
I wouldn't want to say one way or the other. But.
All right, she's going to be cagey about it.
But, you know, it's a very different happiness than the actual happiness you experience when you're organically happy, I guess. So I think of it as this like synthetic form of happiness.
Yeah, great point.
I have something I want to say in regards to that, but I feel like it's going to make us jump all over. But at this point, let's just jump. Let's just jump. Because what you said about the heroin thing made me think of the idea of, at a certain point, something we might deal with in season 2, which is like the possible unhiving of these individuals, and sort of how I think that would naturally lead into like a crash almost, like you have the high and then you have the depression crash. And I wonder too, like if that is, we don't know exactly what would happen if somebody was released from the hive or removed from the hive. We can only speculate. Are they going to retain any memories of it? Are they going to retain their memories from before they joined? Are they going to want to go back? Are they going to go into a deep, dark depression? Because what they felt before is something they're no longer feeling. And like you say, what's the opposite of the happiness or the state that they're in would be an unhappiness. Would they regret it? All of this makes me think, and Jen and I have brought this up before, that the whole concept of the hive mind and all the people in it really make me think of like a cult, like cult behavior. And I said to Jen, before we knew what this show was, I was like, oh my God, please let it be about a cult. And I mean, this was not what I had in mind when I said that, but it bears out, because I really do think that all of the behavior that we're seeing within the hive is very reminiscent of how a cult member would feel. It's like you're saying, you're in this system of control where it's sure, you may think you're happy and everything, all your needs are met and you're doing everything that you're being, I don't want to say told to do, but that you think you need to be doing. But is it your happiness or is it for everyone? It's for everyone. And I mean, who's to say that's a bad thing? But like in this particular situation, it really does feel culty from an outside perspective, because we are all people who are not members of the hive. And so it's easy for us to look at that and be like, my God, that seems terrible. Like, the actual, not the hive's effect on the world, which I think is arguably probably good. I think everything about the actual earth is probably benefiting from the hive.
Probably is.
The environment, all those things. But like, what about from within? I can't help but think it just feels like a system of control that you're being controlled.
Yeah. Controlled by something that you didn't agree to.
Exactly.
Joining. At least, you know, for you, our usual understanding of cults, at least it seems as though you have some degree of choice in joining it. Now, usually you lose that sense of choice at some point, but at least you started down the road yourself. Whereas with the hive, you had no choice or expectations.
Something that's interesting up to that point, Jen, and I don't think that this is anything Vince intended. I know when we had the fabulous Ray Seahorn on our podcast, she said that Vince is not specifically writing to certain themes. So maybe he didn't have this in mind. But I always think about the concept of the joining happening against everyone's will, really actually fitting in with the idea of a cult. Because anytime you talk about an ex-cult member who is, you know, being deprogrammed or has left the cult, they will say nobody chooses to join a cult. And it's true because they aren't making the choice, I'm going to join a cult. No one does that. They suddenly are just in it, and then they can't, at least my perspective, my opinion, my perspective, disclaimer, they can't see their way out of it, you know? And so they haven't chosen necessarily, but they're in it. And I like that in terms of just like a metaphor for the joining. I think it actually really does make sense.
Yeah, I agree.
I also think it's about the alternatives when you're choosing or not choosing to leave, for example. But what alternatives do you have there? You can choose to leave and then you've lost everything, or you can stay. And I don't think when you're thinking about free will, if there's no alternatives to another choice, is that really free will? Like when you're just considering what someone's faced with. And it's like, I noticed a lot of the times when I was rewatching recently, Zosha would say things, or other hive members would say things to Carol like, you know, your life is your own. Or I remember Zosha saying to Carol, I think it was in the final episode, about whether to stay with Manusas or get out of there with the hive. She says, it's completely up to you. And they're giving her the illusion that it's completely up to her. But what can she do? If she says, no, I'm going to stay with Manusas, she's choosing that psychological deprivation and depths of like being broken that almost made her suicidal, or did make her suicidal. So, you know, is it a meaningful choice? I don't really think these alternatives are. It's not like I'm going to choose to have water or I'm going to choose to have juice. Okay.
Yeah. There's no real choice to be made here. And I noticed that, I think it's a great point, Amelia, because I noticed that throughout the each episode, we often hear the hive speaking in terms of asking permission from Carol for everything they do. You know, at Sprouts, they're saying, may we sneak past you, Carol? When Zosha's saving Carol from the grenade, if we may, she says before she saves Carol's life.
Even though she doesn't really wait for an answer there, but she
doesn't actually wait. But she does
ask. Yes,
she makes the attempt. She makes it looks as though she's asking for permission. So it's they really do like to hammer on that kind of language,
making you think it's your choice.
Making you think it's your choice, and always sort of respecting your boundaries. And yes, you can choose. Your life is your own. You have all this autonomy, all of this. I mean, Carol says it best in Grenade when she says, so I have all this autonomy until I don't. And it's such an interesting, sort of complicated line that they somehow try to walk.
Yeah. And I think too, and I think we might have mentioned this at one point, Jen, but like in the pilot, when Davis Taffler is talking to Carol, and we see those chyrons come up on the screen, like that are so hilarious. Like one of the first ones we see, if not the first one we see, is your life is your own. Yeah. It's almost like they're already conditioned. They already know that that's a huge concern for Carol. I find it such a strange divergence, because it doesn't make sense that they're so concerned about that, because their whole goal is to get her to convert. So rather than like reassuring her that her life is her own, it's almost like they should be telling her why it's so great to be one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, that could just be damage control. But like you say, like even Zosha says things to her throughout that are very similar, that are like, it's up to you, it's your choice, whatever. Because also, and then this just pisses me off even more, when you think about it, they know at what point do they know that it doesn't matter? It doesn't matter what Carol says because they're going to get her anyway. They already have her eggs. They are currently making the magic batch. Doesn't matter. Let's just keep her happy because pretty soon she's going to be one of us regardless. And I mean, that's the biggest lack of consent, I think.
And I think certainly by the time of Charm Offensive, they know that. And so everything that happens in that relationship between Carol and Zosha is predicated on them knowing this is a distraction technique to keep her happy while we just work on that together.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, in my opinion, I don't know.
Yeah. And they know, not only do they know that she doesn't want to join, they also know how important the question of conversion without consent is to Carol as an individual because of her conversion therapy experience. It's a key part of her identity and her character is her need to be autonomous and to keep all of that from her. They know how damaging that will be to her to even find that out and how far from what she wants any of this is. But like you say, Amelia, they're just still plowing ahead. They don't care. And it's not that they hate her and they want to hurt her. They think they know best. This is a question, and this is a question throughout the show that's comes up more than once. Who does know best? I mean, obviously, we as viewers, Carol knows best, but there is also, an argument theoretically, philosophically to be made. Well, Carol thinks she knows best for the rest of the world as well, which Zosha sort of, says to her in Please Carol. You say that you want to change us too. You don't know what our experience is. You're deciding for us. You don't want us to decide to you, but isn't that what you're doing to us? So it becomes a kind of ongoing question of who decides for whom, who is throwing the life preserver and who is actually drowning. And so I think that's an interesting question too. When Carol says to Kusamayu, "Oh no, honey, you don't want that." And it's just another interesting angle on that because it's such a complex question asked in this show that there isn't an obvious one answer. There are layers to it, which I like.
I think worth pointing out too, Jen, is like you said that Zosha says to Carol, like, you're trying to change us too, which is true, particularly in that episode. Like up through episode 6, her whole goal is to change them back. But by the finale, I would argue maybe even by Charm Offensive, Carol's no longer interested in that. She doesn't seem to be, she seems to have just fallen into this place where she's accepting. It's this place of acceptance. This is what life's going to be like. And she is no longer trying to change the hive. She's no longer trying to, she's thinking, you know what, maybe I can just live my life with Zosha in this happiness and that'll just be my life. She's not thinking that Zosha is still trying to change her. She's not thinking that. And so there is a shift in power at that point in terms of who's got the power. And it's the hive. The hive has the power. So it's a huge shift in the series, I think.
Yeah, I think the power that they've created, well, first of all, they changed the whole world and most of the people living in it, which is a huge power move. But then I think when it comes to
power move,
it is like one of the biggest. When it comes to what they did to Carol when they left her, they chose to break her psychologically. And like, I'm not saying that they're a malignant entity because I don't know. I think truly that they want what's best for her, even though, you can argue that the people who were doing conversion therapy wanted what was best for Carol. And,
right.
Best. But I think that they chose psychological deprivation and torture in order to condition her to need them back and want them back and to give up and to think, as you say, Annie, to think, well, this is just the life that I have now. That she's operating under like a reasonable belief that this is a permanent situation now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that I think plays into when people think, well, Zosha didn't like Zosha, the old Zosha never consented to having this relationship with Carol. She didn't consent to anything. But like Carol has no reason to think that that's ever going to come back, that any of these people are ever going to come back ever again.
Mm-hmm.
She's only operating with what she has there in front of her, which is, this is my life now. And if I don't connect with these people, I will die. I will die. So she's choosing survival and connection. And I don't think you can think that she's just like treading water and waiting for it to change back again. She thinks that there's no hope anymore. She's by herself. She tried and she failed. And this is what she's stuck with.
Yeah. And they created the situation where she would be at this point. They managed that situation to get her to this point where they control, like you said, all of her access to humanity, to other people, any kind of social connection. They also control all of the resources of the world, essentially, too. So, I mean, I think that on the surface sometimes when you're watching Pluribus, because of how the Hive members act, it's easy to forget how much power they do have, because it's like, oh, Carol can snap her fingers and they'll do anything she says, almost.
Right.
And so it kind of feels like she's got some power, which they probably want her to feel that way. They want to give that illusion. And I think sometimes the viewer falls into that illusion as well.
Yeah, because as Amelia just pointed out, like they can say no. They say no to Carol when she, drugs Zosha and nearly kills her. They say no more. No, we're not. Our primary interest right now is to leave, is to keep ourselves safe. We could say that's based on fear. And I think at first it could be based on just genuine survival. And I believe that. But after a while, like really, like after 40 days, I don't think you can argue anymore that they are willing to throw her a life preserver. As we pointed out, she's literally on the verge of suicide and they still won't come. They still are not going to come help her because their own survival they have put ahead of hers. But I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because I think most humans would do that. But I'm just saying that there is a hierarchy, as we've discussed, to their biological imperative. Their biological imperative to survive, is that higher than making Carol happy? Yeah, it is. They need to survive. Turning her is probably even higher. Turning Carol is probably even higher on the hierarchy, which makes me think that's why after a certain amount of time, it turns from just self-protection into manipulation. 40 days. I absolutely believe that, especially since I'm pretty sure at that point we know they're working on her special magic elixir to change her. They don't need to go make her feel happy. They have no reason to. They have no motivation because they're going to get her eventually, and then she'll be happy,
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And they go out of their way so much to ensure she's as isolated as she can be, farther than they have to go. They won't even talk to her on the phone. They make her listen to that damn message over and over again, to the point where she probably goes a little bit insane just from that.
Shout out Patrick Fabian. We love
Patrick Fabian, though, I'd never go crazy listening to his voice, but Carol might after a while.
Yeah. You know what? Since you brought up the idea of Carol and Zosha and how Carol had to react to these 40 days of isolation, let's talk a little bit about consent. Let's talk a little bit about sexual consent, guys.
Because let's talk about sex, baby.
Yeah, let's do it. Because, I mean, this is not just something that we're talking about on the periphery. This is actually a thing that is addressed in the show, in episode 2, with Mr. Diabate, who has, I think, and we'll see if you guys agree, but I think it's a different scenario. I don't want to come across as hypocritical or that this is a gender-related issues, because I think if you take Mr. Diabate and Carol and reverse their genders, I would have the same thing to say. I would have the same exact thing to say. I feel like it's different with Diabate for many reasons.
Yes. I think they've got the same set of conditions in the world, but they have different power in the scenarios. And for that reason, I think his actions is morally reprehensible too strong. I think there are a lot more.
Do it.
I think that we could criticize them a lot more strongly than Carol.
I agree, and I think mostly because of the quickness with which he adapts to this new world, right? Like he has not been put through the paces like Carol has. He has not made any attempt to do anything other than exploit these women.
Yeah, he's aware of the asymmetry and he chooses to use it to get his ends, which I think is really important. And I don't think that he's doing it to hurt anyone. I'm not saying he sat down there and was like, oh, I'm going to really enjoy having sex with people without their consent. Yes. I think he's opportunistic. But he's obviously, like I think you guys have discussed previously on the pod, that he's probably a survivor who's had to learn to adapt to all these different scenarios and get there himself. And he might be used to transgressing, sort of societal norms. Who knows? We don't know where he came from. But I think that's probably in keeping and explains why he can quickly use the opportunities in front of him to survive and thrive.
And really in a very planned way. It feels like he can justify it to Carol and to himself because he can say, hey, are you guys okay with this? Yeah. They said they're okay with it. I got to wipe my hands clean because everything's good.
I've done like the bare minimum to establish consent for my purposes. Good enough. Let's go with it. And it's a little more subtle than that.
I was going to say, like, I think that Carol is acting within a coercive structure that the hive has created, whereas I think that Diabate is leveraging the coercive structure. And that's
it's again with the power. The power is in the different situation there. It would be remiss of us not to point out Carol's hypocrisy because I do think that's obvious, and I think that it's obvious in many ways, just in terms of how much she changes but in those last two episodes, and how many things that she was railing against in the first two episodes, she's now completely in support of. Like, that's worth pointing out. But I still, even though that's a fact of what's happening, I still think the situations are different. Like, I can still sit here and say I don't think Carol is taking advantage in the same way that Diabate is.
Yeah, I think that Carol's in a very different, even though the hive is the same, essentially, at the time of the beginning of the show, at the time that we meet Diabate, and at the time that Carol forms her connection with Zosha, Carol and Diabate are in very different positions at those two different times. So the hive may have the same role, but the people, the two humans involved, are in very different positions in those two occasions. And Diabate has no enforced vulnerability that Carol has. And so while Carol loses her power over the course of the show, and to the point where she is very much at the mercy of the hive, Diabate there's no indication he's anything other than at least at the same level as the hive. And he, like you said, Amelia, he leverages the situation to use it to his advantage. And, for all intents and purposes, he's in a position of power. He's getting everything he wants. I suppose he might ask for something and they'd say no, but it doesn't happen. And he's also, as we find out by the end, he's not even going to have to worry about being forced to join the way Carol is, because he doesn't have any eggs flying around out there. So he's able to say, I do not consent, and they have to abide by that. So he is just in a different position.
Gosh, that's so interesting. The implications of that for next season are really interesting.
Because they say, maybe 2 or 3 months left before that's it for Carol. And so she's going to be operating within a framework of desperation, whereas he's still like, hey, we'll figure it out. Like, trust the process. I'm guessing he would just come out with something like that. Just like, all right, Carol. But no, it's not all right if you're Carol.
Yeah, absolutely. Like all of the survivors are in the position that Diabate is in, as far as we know, of having the right to say no.
I think well, it's really important to mention that the hive has used intimacy to manage Carol since the first introduction of Zosha. I mean, why did they make her look like that? So intimacy has always been part of their control of Carol. They engineered a scenario in which intimacy would become integral to her survival, basically, as far as she can tell. And so it's very it's hard to put yourself into the position of saying, well, they didn't want that. They made that exact situation like that.
Right. They
Why
created
does she have that wig? Yeah, they created it. So
Yeah, that was the plan from the very beginning. Like they all sat down in their little hive way, and that's the plan they immediately came up with. I mean, they were right. Obviously, they had a lot of good information to draw on. And this was the plan from the beginning.
I just think there's always, whenever anyone says that like their main goal is to make Carol happy or to make everyone happy, I think that's absolutely true. But I think there's an end of the sentence that isn't being said. And the end of the sentence is they want to make everyone happy so that they'll join. That is what they want. If Carol were happy for the rest of the time and until everybody, starved themselves off the planet, that's not what they want. They're not going to be okay with that. Like this is a temporary situation as far as they're concerned. Like
yeah.
I mean, you know what it reminds me of? When I was at uni and I had to study a lot of Roman history, there was the concept in Roman history. It's called Augustan Pax, which is the first emperor of Rome was Augustus, and he had an empire. He made the empire, and he did it through pacifying all his neighbors. And they called it peace, but it wasn't peace in the sense of like happiness and everyone's content and you have freedom. It was peace only in the sense that if you resist, you will be killed. So you better not resist. And it just really reminds me of that. Their happiness, their pacifying Carol, like we want to make you all happy. We just don't want you to resist. That's what they mean.
Right.
Really.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. My husband is going to love that historical reference. He's a very big fan of Roman history.
Something stuck in there.
Yeah. I love all the little the references because I like learning. The more you know.
I love to learn. This is why it's great to have other voices on the podcast. We get to have different perspectives. Annie already knows every piece of knowledge that I contain, so it's nice to have some new knowledge brought to the table.
That's generous. I think, what I think is an interesting thing to talk about? Let's talk about a little bit of speculation because I want to
speculate.
Yeah, I want to talk about the hive as the hive and the unhived because and again, this is all speculation because I don't think currently any of us know enough about the hive and how they experience life other than the things that Zosha, I think, has told us. I don't think we really know anything other than that. So, but we can take her at her word, I think.
I think so.
But what exactly do you guys think is going to happen if somebody leaves the hive? Because I think we've talked about this prior on the pod, have always seen it as let's use Zosha as an example, just because she's sort of our little guide through this world. We have Zosha 1, which is the real Zosha. I will say the real Zosha, the individual Zosha that we don't know that existed prior to the joining. And then right now we have Zosha 2, and that's the Zosha 2 hived. She's in the hive. What is Zosha 3 going to look like? If she comes out, is she going to immediately revert back to Zosha 1? Or is she going to be Zosha 1, or will she be a new version of Zosha? And that brings in all of these strange issues of what has she consented to? What hasn't she consented to? What will she remember? All of these issues. I mean, what do you guys think?
I would say that sort of at the beginning of the show and sort of without thinking too hard about it, my assumption was if you could snap your fingers and unhive Zosha, for example, I just kind of thought, oh, she's going to be so relieved. Oh, thank you for saving me. I feel so much better. I can't believe they did that to me. But then, the more I think about it, the more I think, it's going to be more complicated than that, probably. Yeah. It's not going to be that simple. But I want to hear your thoughts, Amelia.
Well, I can't answer it definitively, obviously, but I think in terms of storytelling, it's more interesting for there to be this third Zosha who's a combination of the two. Like, your Zosha, it now remembers all of the new Zosha's experiences and creates a third one. Because I think in terms of storytelling, to just have to go back to square one and relearn everything, it's like, nah. But having said that, and you guys might be able to answer this question better than, I can't answer the question because I can't remember, but what is it in Waikaro with Raban when Raban comes back after being gone? Does Raban remember? Are we speculating?
Raban doesn't remember. Is it Lakeisha? Is that the name of the main character?
Yeah.
Raban doesn't remember her, which is very telling. I think
Yes.
it's like maybe not that Zosha's not going to remember Carol, but Zosha, the new Zosha, might be like, what was that? What happened?
Yes.
Not necessarily who are you, but like, who are you to me? You know, that's I
Right.
think the real question.
Yeah.
Because now they're in theory there is a me, whereas before there was no me. You know, so I think
Yeah.
that's what's going to be interesting is like, how will a hive member such as Zosha deal with suddenly being a me again? Like I'm
It's
rooting.
not going to be easy. It's not going to be simple. That's for sure.
I don't want to say I'm rooting for it because I don't. Well, fuck it. I am rooting for it.
Yeah,
I'm rooting for like the deep dark depression angle, the I want to go back angle, because
How weird.
Yes, I want angst and depression. Shocking,
Yeah.
but like I mean, you know, narratively, I just think that would be the most interesting thing.
I
But
agree.
I think that honestly, when I think about all the, you know, dozens of cult documentaries I've watched and all the people who come out of the cult, like they're relieved to be out, but they have all this, you know, deprogramming to do. Like they have all of these things they need to do to sort of break free and get away from where they need to be. And I think that would be really interesting if somebody broke free and it was just they had to deal with that rather than just, okay, now I'm suddenly on the side of you guys and you have one more in your numbers. No, it's not going to be like that. But I do think it'll be interesting because they're going to have, hopefully, so much more insight and information that'll be very useful to Carol and Manussos if they even want to help. That's another
what
question.
I was going to say. Like, are they going to be thankful? Like you were saying, Jen, if Zosha woke up, is she going to be thankful to that? Is anyone going to be thankful to it? Because, you know, we don't know. First of all, we have to believe that they're experiencing this state of bliss, and that would be hard to come out of because it's addictive. That's great. But secondly, what was their life before that? Do they want to go back to that life?
Yeah.
There's been speculation about Zosha. You know, was she a trafficked person? Was she in like poverty? All of these things. Is that a life for her worth going back to? I don't know. And there'd be obviously millions of others on Earth who are living in similar dire circumstances. So it's hard to know where their loyalty would lie to the people just helping them have this blissful life, even if it's not real, whatever real means, or the people who've freed them from that but cast them back into abject despair. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I
think there's every reason to think that it'll be something that differs by individuals. And that's the kind of the whole point, I guess, is that everyone will have their own reaction to having been in the hive. Like you say, Amelia, maybe for some people, just having their needs met, just their basic physical needs, would have been a relief. And that would have had an impact. And for others, having their emotional needs met, you know, they didn't feel so lonely anymore, things like that. They will all have a different experience. Whereas, you know, someone who's a bit like Carol would be like, fuck no, I'm glad I'm out of that. So I think that it could be a really interesting, complicated question.
I remember, like, we are always talking about the please Carol of it all at the end and how sort of layered that scene is and how many meanings it could possibly have. And I remember when we first watched that episode, Jen, and I had the interpretation that Zosha's crying because the mere idea of going back to where she was is making her cry. And I found that really interesting at the time. I don't know if that's legit or real or whatever, but I think it's a worthy interpretation. Like I like the idea that there's a tiny bit of her coming out there because she's under the truth serum. Like she can't hide the feelings that she's having, just like how, you know, in Charm Offensive, she brings out the little nugget of wisdom to tell Carol, nugget of memory, like a childhood memory. And here I feel like it's possible that under the truth serum, a little bit of her own memory is surfacing and the thought of reversing the joining makes her break out into tears, which I think is, if true, could be very prophetic in how she's going to be if released from the hive, which I think is interesting. And if that pans out, I think it'll be a cool callback.
Would be. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about Kusamayu for a little bit here, because I feel like this is a sort of unique situation. She's the first of the survivors to make the choice to join the joining,
Mm-hmm.
join the joining.
Join the joining.
But, and Jen, you always say, is it really informed consent? Because they've put on this show for her for so long. Does she have a true understanding? No one can have a true understanding of what it's going to be like to be in the hive. We don't have an understanding of what it's like in the hive, and I don't think Vince Gilligan can make us understand what it's like to be in the hive. Look, I have all the faith in the world that if anyone could do it, Vince could, but I don't know how. Like, I don't know how any of us could possibly know what that feels like. So when Kusamayu joins, is she's consenting? Yes. She's saying yes, but is it informed consent?
I think that's such a key question. And I think that the hive is such a bizarre concept to us as humans that we don't really have the capacity to fully understand it, I think. And certainly in Kusamayu's case, I think they were putting on a show for her. And I think she has every reason to think that the life she sees around her will continue. The life in the village, she'll still have her baby goat pal. All of those things will continue on just as they were. She has no reason to think otherwise, I think. And so unless she understands that when she joins, oh, by the way, we're going to pack up and take off, then she doesn't understand even the basics of what's going to happen when she joins. And I really don't think they've explained it to her. And so I think that without knowing what she's agreed to, even on that very fundamental initial basic level, where are we going to live? Without understanding that, I don't think you can call that consent, because she doesn't know what she's consenting to.
And also, I agree with all that. But I just also think, what's her alternative? Like, there's not really that she can just continue living like that forever with them play acting, however long they're willing to do that. And we don't know how long they're willing to do that. But, she either joins or she rejects everything that she's ever known. Because if she says to them, I will never consent to join you, never, 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 they would, I think, have to turn their back on her, I guess, because unless they're just willing to live out this farce for the next 10 years. So what are her realistic alternatives?
I mean,
the choice hard. Like,
and they seem to live in a fairly isolated location, so it's not like she could just go and hang out in another neighborhood. This is the only place she's ever lived, and she would be very alone, and she would have like some major problems to deal with.
Could you imagine if they pulled on Kusamayo what they did on Carol? Like how horrifying that would be? Like, truly, how would she even survive? Like that would be just. She doesn't have a Sprouts.
She does not.
It's horrifying. But
she's used to a collective society that is even more so. Like, so isolation for her is even more damaging than to Carol, who has. We come from a more individualistic society, so you agree with that. But for her, it would be like. Just not.
She's thrived on family and community her entire life in a way that Carol didn't. So that's a very, very, very valid good point. Another thing, though, in terms of the consent and the joining, I always have to remind myself, once you're on the inside, all the stuff you thought, like even if she thought, this is going to be great, I'm going to join, we're going to share our thoughts, we're going to all hang out here in the village and be happy forever, even if those are the things she thinks on the outside and that's not the truth, once she's on the inside, it seems like legitimately she's okay with it. Like it seems like even if they're being, brainwashed or whatever it is, suddenly the fact of leaving the culture behind and going off to milk cows is fine with her. You know what I mean? Like they legitimately think that's okay. It's like they suddenly just change their minds and now that's fine. So if that's the case, if that's true, which I actually believe that it is, then it's still not informed consent, I don't think, but that doesn't mean that she's not quote unquote happy. And then we go back to our question of what is happiness. It's a different kind of happiness. Yeah. But it's really interesting though to think about once she's in, she doesn't care anymore. So
that's a great point. And it just comes down to the question of she doesn't exist anymore.
So that's true. Yeah.
She's not, the Kusamayu who may have objected when she actually found out the reality of the situation. She doesn't exist. There's not even a second when she thinks, because I think that Carol says, to the survivors, at that last moment, you may change your mind and wish that you had stayed the way you were. I don't know if she would even have that second,
No,
because she
I don't
goes
think
from
so.
Kusamayu to part of the hive, and there's nothing in between, I think.
Yeah,
So I
and
think
there's no
that
more Kusamayu.
there's no, you're basically consenting to no longer existing as an
yes,
individual. It's
yes,
almost like
that's
a
a
death.
really good way of saying it. It is
Yeah.
almost like a death. Like, that's horrific, but that's true. You as an individual have ceased to exist.
Mhm.
You've basically consented, or not consented. She's consented to turn into something else.
At least, Then
Yes.
she, at least she's agreed to it, but agreeing and consenting maybe not the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a good distinction.
So, as if this hasn't been a tricky subject to tackle thus far, I think we should really talk about sort of the difference between consent in mind and consent in body. Because there's an argument to be made that the bodies are consenting to something that maybe the mind isn't capable of consenting to. I would say particularly with Diabate, but we'll get into Carol and Zosha in a minute. Just the idea of, doesn't Zosha say, it's in Pirate Lady, I think, when she says affection is always welcome, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
It's always welcome, but does that take into account the effects on their bodies? And this is also assuming that hive person, whatever person he may be sleeping with, number 3, emerges unscathed, which, who knows? Like, it would be almost like, I don't know, being drunk and assaulted and then waking up and being like, what has happened? Like, I don't know what, like, it's tricky. It's really tricky.
Yeah, it's very tricky. And I think that it's such a complicated question, and it's such a sort of unique situation, and one that we can't fully grasp, that there's no clear answer, which I think is interesting. But I think it definitely is concerning. It definitely evokes concern.
I think I have seen people online sort of comparing, like saying, if a non-hive person is sleeping with a hive person, it's like having sex with a unconscious person, which obviously everyone knows is completely legally and ethically wrong in every single sense. But I think in some ways, unconsciousness is a temporary state. You're expected to wake up from being unconscious, but they don't know whether these people are ever going to wake up or become conscious again. So you're like, yes, if they were to wake up again, that would be completely an assault. But if they never wake up, it's still an assault, but who's like feeling that? Who's
the victim?
Yeah.
And if they're saying that they're okay with it, and then that they consent to it, like, are we to take them at their word? Like, that's another question.
Well, I think no, because I think that there's no way that they just, because they say yes, but can they say no? So does it invalidate the fact that they can't say no? Does that invalidate that they say yes? I think it's wrong. Like, this is where I feel like I'm a hypocrite, because I judge Diabate very seriously for what he's done. Even though I don't think that he's meaning harm, I think he is absolutely taking advantage of people who can't say no. And making them say yes is not allowing them to say no. Whereas I feel differently about Carol.
Well, let's talk about that then.
It's a different situation, as we discussed earlier, that they're in different positions, because Carol's not going around in Pirate Lady wanting to sleep with Zosha and all the beautiful women. That's not where she's at. She is only willing to connect with a member of the hive once she has been manipulated to that point.
And the fact that she, at that point, like, if we can consider Diabate as sort of being drawn in, like cult adjacent, like he's been pulled into the fold, Carol at that point in Pirate Lady is still on the outside. So she's viewing the situation as almost like we are as a viewer. Like, she sees what we see in that moment, because she's not the type of person who's going to take advantage of something. As you said, Amelia, like, she has to be put through hell to get to the point where she's basically, I don't want to say she's forced to, I'm not going to go that far, but she has reached a moment of desperation. And it's, I guess that's why I think in my mind justify what she's doing and maybe not so much what Diabate's doing. That's how it feels different to me.
Yeah, because I think with cults and with, the hive, there's the control, the mind control issue, certainly, which is very prevalent in a cult. Like, that's the whole point, I guess. But I think more important is to look at the asymmetry of power and the engineered dependency. So there's this, like, Carol is completely dependent on them, and she doesn't have the power, so that even within cults, there is this, you are dependent on the people. So you might not think that you're being controlled because, it's your choice to be in that cult, but you can't live without them. That's how they make you feel. And they've got, those are the two kind of really important, I think, points that make Carol's choices more defensible, than Diabate's, because she is dependent on them. And I don't think at the point where he chooses to engage in his sexual contact with them that he is dependent on them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. I love that point. Engineered dependency. I like that phrase. Yeah. Really good. I think that you could even apply that kind of comparison to some certain kinds of toxic relationships, that sometimes people are made to feel as though they can't leave someone that they're with because they're made to feel they can't be on their own because they've been emotionally abused to that point. So I think that you can compare it with that kind of a situation as well. And when I think about specifically Carol and Zosha and their relationship as, well, not really individuals, but individual and hive, that is even more complicated, I think, because, and it's one that I have a hard time sort of landing somewhere definitive in terms of how I feel about Carol and Zosha when they start their sexual relationship. Because, there's an argument to be made that, well, Zosha initiates it, technically. But she also has no ability to say no one way or the other. And also, I think maybe there's also a question of why she initiates it. Does she initiate because she wants it, or does she initiate it because she thinks Carol wants it? Does she initiate it because she thinks it will manipulate Carol or make her happy, allegedly? Those are all complicated questions too. I am glad that at least we did see Zosha initiated, apparently.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be a lot more icky, shall we say, if she hadn't.
I don't think Carol would have, though. So I think that helps me sort of feel better about the whole situation too, is because I don't think Carol ever would have. I think ever. I really don't. I think she might have stuck to her guns and not crossed that line. You can have companionship without having sex. Like you can. Like sex, I think, is a natural human desire, but plenty of people go without it. But I'm just saying, if Carol had made that leap, I might feel differently about this whole situation. But because Zosha makes the first move, and this is interesting, not to digress too far here, but I can see getting a flashback, as we so desperately want, of joining day for everybody. Because Diabate doesn't have like a chaperone, as far as we're aware. His chaperone is his legion of ladies, right? I could see a world in which he's manipulated in very much the same way. That he is approached by this harem of women, because just like Raban, they know that's what he needs. And they approach him and make the first move. And then that would lead him to think, oh, this is great. And that would make me rethink all of this. And I think that maybe not, maybe it wouldn't, but I think having more information about how that power dynamic began, was it really them manipulating him or coming at him, making him realize it was okay to do this, or at least in his brain that it was okay to do this, would I think differently about his actions? And I might.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. He does have this whole harem of ladies very quickly, doesn't he? I mean, he's got them on his plane by the time we have Pirate Lady, which is only like days in.
Yeah. And I think that is a very interesting point, where at no point did he then, if that's the scenario that happened, at no point did he consciously sit down and decide to take advantage. It was presented to him as, this is what we're here for. And
this is what we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is your new reality. Yeah.
Yeah. That's true. There's just so many different aspects and subtleties to this.
Yes. And even, Jen, when you were talking about like you don't know where you stand exactly because, you know, there's all these different things in play. I also don't know where I stand. And I think I'm very comfortable being not a moral absolutist about it. Like I can say, I'm pretty sure that Carol's being taken advantage of. Do I think that it's completely a fair relationship or unfair relationship where Zosha has all the power? No, I don't think that either. I think it's more, they have more power, but you know, it's still a gray area for Carol. It is because as we say, like there's too much we don't know about who the Hive are underneath everything and what their agency is like and everything. So it's okay with me to be.
I think it's really hard to go into a Vince Gilligan show and be morally absolute about anything.
Yeah. So true. Yeah. I mean, you know, moral gray areas are where he thrives. And that can be hard for viewers. I think as viewers, we're almost like trained, or we've become used to watching shows where we're told what to believe and things tend to be more or less black and white. And so people, I think sometimes as viewers get a bit confused when they're watching a Vince Gilligan show. Am I supposed to like Walter White? What's going on here? So it can be confusing. It can be confusing
Spoiler
when
alert.
you're not used to that.
No,
he's a bad guy. He's bad people. But I think that just
but
as
even
viewers,
that's complex. Sorry, I need to quantify that. Even that is complex. Even that is complex. I am half in jest, fully in earnest, as Jen likes to say. Yeah.
He's a bad guy, but he has shreds of humanity. And if he didn't have those shreds of humanity, the show wouldn't be nearly as compelling.
He wouldn't be interesting to watch, and he absolutely is.
And even when he becomes, increasingly bad, there still might be moments where you feel sympathy for him. And so it's that this is Vince Gilligan's wheelhouse is what we're saying. And so the fact that I admire you, Amelia, that you're sort of like you're sort of comfortable sort of sitting in this gray area. I struggle with it a little bit because I do tend to be sort of very logical, and I like to slot things into their place. But I think that it's good and challenging to kind of have to live with ambiguity, and it's okay for things to be ambiguous and for people to interpret it differently. We have similar thoughts on a lot of these scenes, but someone might have a very different thought, and that's totally okay. And it's designed that way in many ways, and so I think that the ambiguity makes it interesting.
Right. I mean, I come at things very logically too, Jen, but I love Kim Wexler, and if you speak slander about her at all, I will come at you.
Oh my God.
I have to say this because Amelia is wearing a Kim Wexler shirt. And,
I think it's pretty clear where Amelia's
speaking of the morally ambiguous,
I was going to say, just as devil's advocate, don't come at me, ladies. There are people, certainly, there you can't say that Kim Wexler is morally unambiguous through Better Call Saul. I mean, it doesn't mean that she's not an awesome kick-ass character. But certainly there are people that have bigger problems with her than others. And it's hard to argue with them. It's kind of like...
No, it's not hard, actually. I just tell them to go to hell.
They're kind of bad. She does do some bad stuff. There's no question about it. But that's why Vince Gilligan is such a genius, though, because he takes these people that are sometimes doing bad things and still makes us fascinated by them and interested in them and like them. And it makes me feel funny inside sometimes. It's so interesting.
One of his strengths is that he takes the people doing bad things and he asks you to make up your own mind, but also most of them get punished for doing bad things. He's not actually presenting these terrible people getting away with awful things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
She gets soundly punished for her choices.
Oh, absolutely.
That's one of the most affecting parts of that show, to see that she is instrumental in her own tragedy and it's heartbreaking. And then, I won't spoil the ending if anyone hasn't seen the ending.
So great. But it's very sort of Shakespearean, isn't it? That's the whole kind of like
the whole
it's so good. Shakespearean tragedy is that the hero is typically responsible for their own downfall. And it makes, it's just great writing and great character creation.
Yes.
And
we've seen that with Carol as well, that people are debating endlessly about her. And you're like, she's a reluctant hero. She's in this for the, she didn't ask for any of this. And is she perfect? No. But are any of us going to be making the perfect choices? No.
Absolutely.
We love her because she's the most human person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We love her.
And I mean, which of us can judge? Which of us has been in the situation where the world has been taken over by a hive? I mean, who knows how we would act in that situation? It's a very extreme situation. Yeah. So I no judgment from me.
I can say definitively, I would be behaving worse than Carol.
I probably would be too, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I probably would be. Yeah, I'd probably be doing all kinds of bad things. I would lose my moral compass really fast, probably.
Oh, I would just lose my will to live, probably. But like did she want a girlfriend in the hive, Zosha? Is that her idea of an ideal romantic relationship? Definitely not. That's not what she hoped and dreamed of as a little girl. But when she's put in that situation of, I need human connection. This is a human connection. I'm going to choose. And when this person kisses her, when she's in this absolutely like desperate state, as she was up to that kiss, who can blame her for hungrily giving in to affection, which is something we all need and we all want in different forms. But, nobody's thinking that this is something that she orchestrated or specifically dreamed of. It's just or even wanted. I think you make a really good point, Annie, that Carol may never have initiated this, and like quite is a good argument that she wouldn't have, because like you say, Amelia, the moment when Zosha chooses to kiss Carol, it's not a romantic moment. It's not a moment where they're both kind of making lovey-dovey eyes at one another. Carol is again at a very low moment because she's thinking about, I have to pursue this mission that I'm on, even if you all leave me again. She's clearly devastated at the very thought. That's the moment that Zosha chooses to kiss her. So that is interesting in itself.
Absolutely. And I don't think she would have. I really don't. I think Carol would have stuck to her, I want to say morals, because she felt so strongly about it prior. I really think that she wouldn't have gone there. I don't think she would have. But you hit someone at their lowest, and then it's very human to think, okay, well, this has happened. This is the thing that's happened. And I don't feel bad about it. Like, I feel okay. And so that means it can happen again, and it can keep happening. I feel like that's a very human thing to do, particularly when she's treading water. She's just surviving.
She's just trying to keep her head above water. Yeah, I think that Carol in the finale, until she arrives in her badass helicopter at the end, Carol seems like almost like a hive person. She doesn't seem like herself. She seems like she has been. Well, she's gotten to the point where she's been completely manipulated, and she's just kind of a little bit blissed out when they go on their sort of world tour of manipulation. And she's not the individual Carol that we knew and that we see again at the end of the episode. So she has been, you could easily say that she's been, kind of brainwashed at that point because of what she's been through, because of the manipulation from the very beginning that the hive engaged in, because of the isolation. I love the way that Ray plays Carol in that episode, because she's different. She just seems slightly sort of like not quite with it. And seem like when she leaves to follow the hive, when they take off, she almost doesn't, she seems to have no choice. She seems to not even have like her own agency at that moment. It's like, I have to do it. And so it's interesting to see that sort of change in her at that point. She's kind of like, she's hit her rock bottom and she's just kind of given into that sort of hive vibe. And it's interesting to see that that's the situation where she winds up giving in.
Well, she's just like the little baby goat, and they've got the bottle of milk, and she's following that bottle of milk to get fed. And she was just like,
so true.
Little
Sad, but true. Absolutely.
Right, like, what's happened to her agency? Like that, you bring up a good point. Like at that point, is she even in control anymore? She's not really, like, because as we said before, the old Carol, the Carol we knew, wouldn't be behaving this way. Mm-hmm. So it's just such an interesting thing to think about. They're in control now. Like the power dynamic is just very askew.
Yeah, I like the way they wrote that, and I like the way that Ray played it. And I was so relieved at the end of the episode when we got our real Carol back, because I couldn't have stood it if we had ended it before that.
Agreed.
Amazing.
Agreed. Yeah. Well, maybe that's a good place to end this conversation, you guys. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add or talk about?
I'm good. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm so glad that you joined us, Amelia. And of course, Annie, you always have great things to say, of course. But I really enjoyed having Amelia on the show with her insights as well. So this was a really interesting, thought-provoking.
Yes, thank you so much.
And fun at the same time.
I think.
But did you have any other things you wanted to add, Amelia?
No, just thank you for having me. It's been really fun, and I've enjoyed it heaps. So yeah, thank you.
I think that we should have you back maybe next season at the end of the season, because I'm sure there will be a lot more of these issues to tackle.
In 3 years' time. Okay, I'll put it in my
right.
Pencil it into your calendar, Amelia. You're going to be like our sort of like moral philosophy consultant. I can see that. I think that would be fun.
I love it. Well, thanks to everybody for listening. Please let us know what you think, because we want to hear what you guys think about all this. It's really tricky. Everybody, be kind, be civil, but I don't need to say that, but I feel like I do. But let us know what you think at Pluribus Pod on Twitter or Blue Sky or at Gmail if you have a whole lot to say. We're here to read it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for listening, and we'll be back with you guys next time on Pluribus Diaries.
Bye.